Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Murphy's Law. We have a lot to dive into today, and I'm happy to say that with me today is V La Bianca. Hey V.
Hello everybody.
How's it going?
It's going good.
Good. Okay, so today's episode, we're going over an oldie, but this was one that you requested.
Yeah, I figured why not give the people what they want?
You know what? It's a fun clip. And so I'm going to give us the intro here so we can dive right in because we've got an interesting conversation to have about this, I think. Here's that intro. What did you want to talk about today?
I have a very interesting story I would like to share with you, and maybe you can provide me with some answers.
You remember that?
I do. I miss the studio too, man.
Right?
Those are the days.
Back in the day. Yeah. So who would have thought that this conversation would have jumped into where it did? But this guy was an absolute peach. I want to jump right into hosting it. So when it comes to hosting, somebody says, I want to tell you a story and I want to see what you think. It's not great. That's not great.
Yeah.
There are plenty of platforms for it, but when somebody wants to tell a story, that means they're not interested in a dialogue. So,
right. I mean, at least he was upfront about the fact that he wanted to tell us the story and wasn't like, I've got a question. Okay, but first, 10 minutes of backstory.
Right. Well, and here's so I tried to jump on that as quick as I could.
Here's the thing that pops into my mind right away. Some people call with stories and they just talk at me for like 15 minutes and it's never interesting. So I would be happy to engage with you and talk about something. And, you know, if you had an experience, I'd love to talk about it. But as long as we can engage about it, I'm good.
That's fine. I'll make it short.
Okay.
And this is Bible related, and I'll make it short, and it's happened to me in real life, okay?
Okay.
All the three criteria we need.
Right? Those are the big ones.
Yeah.
So it's short. It wasn't short. It's Bible related.
Is.
Right? No. It's Bible related. It's not Bible related.
And it happened to me in real life, which also
highly unlikely.
questionable.
Yeah.
Questionable there, yeah.
Especially if it gets further into it. I broke his story up into 2 bits because holy moly. Here's the first one.
As I was sitting here watching TV, the Coke bottles rose up off the table. We're talking 2-pound Coke bottles now, full of Coke, 2 liters.
Okay.
Rose up off the table, and they went all the way across my house in front of my face. And then they went back, and they did that about 7 times. And it scared me to death.
What do you do with that?
Oh my goodness. First you ask, if this is happening across your house 7 times, that's enough time for you to get out your phone, man, right? and fucking record this happening.
And we asked because he was saying it went slowly. In fact, one of the clips that I didn't grab for today because there was just too many clips I had to pick, and among them was asking him, hey, if this was taking the course over the 10 minutes, 15 minutes, how come you didn't record this? You're absolutely right. In Coke bottles?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, to this day, I think the benefit of talking about an episode like this or call like this is, what do you do when you don't fucking know? when you've thought about it, and like to this day, I don't know if it was somebody making something up or if they dreamed it or if it was a Poe or, any of these. It could be anything. But when you just don't know, when it is so out there that there is no basis for common ground, right? We can't say, well, we both agree Coke bottles exist and then kind of move on from there. Like that's about as much as we could agree on before we started spiraling off in very different directions.
Absolutely. And yeah, that first question, is this a Poe? You're right. Actually, I grabbed this clip for later. I'll play it now.
Uh-huh.
Do you know what a Poe is?
What?
Okay, good.
Just to make sure. So for people who don't know what a Poe is, what is a Poe?
A Poe is kind of like the antithesis of a troll. So instead of calling in with a pretend question and then getting on and talking about something, like yelling something offensive or talking about something completely unrelated, a Poe is kind of, they pretend that they have a real position, and they will argue that position with you, even though they don't actually hold it themselves. And they'll just see how far they can push you into this strange world that they concoct. Some people thought that the other week, Rikus, the indigo child from the past, or from the future rather, was a Poe, and that's the kind of mindset that you have to go into. Like, if we're a fairly popular call-in show, there are going to be people who call in and want to get airtime and mess with us. So we have to be careful about how much time do we spend with people who really have an issue and want to talk about it, and people who are just yanking our chains a little bit.
Yeah. And it's so difficult when somebody walks the line, and that hallmark of a Poe is everybody walks away going, were they on what happened? It's just believable enough. And the funny thing is, while I was prepping for this episode, I went back into the comments and looked, and there are a number of people who went, holy crap, I live in the rural South and everybody has a story like this.
Yeah, no, that is another thing that is very interesting to me, which is, there was a caller, I think it was the first time Kevin called in, and he called in about the occult and Ouija boards and demons, and he was talking about these concepts, and everybody was like, this is a Poe, this guy's ridiculous, nobody believes this. And I'm sitting there like, this was me 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I believed this wholeheartedly, and I was in exactly the same place. So a lot of the time, what some people might consider to be a Poe is just honestly a mindset and a worldview that people actually very truly hold. And so that's why we don't want to dismiss people off the bat if their story is really out there, because there is that chance that they live in a particular part of the country or a country where that is considered normal.
Yeah. Well, so you actually did a pretty good job of really trying to connect and being like, hey, I'm going to try and meet you where you're at. I really want to engage here. But first, I kind of want to give the second part of his claim, because we start asking questions, right? We start wanting to break it down the way we're wanting to talk about it right now. But instead of answering the questions, he just kept talking at us.
And I knew it was not human related.
Ow.
So the only thing I knew to do was cry out and start praying. And so I did. And I asked it to leave in Jesus' name. The Coke bottle fell out of midair, and it left, and it has not been back.
The Coke bottle never returned.
Right. Never has a Coke bottle gone back into his house before. He swore off the stuff.
I would after that. I probably would.
I'd switch to Pepsi.
It's probably
at least,
better for him,
I guess.
Hey, maybe a couple 2-liter bottles of Coke. But no, it's
yeah. So that's it continues, and the thing is each of those things he said was itself an assertion,
right?
And making an assertion is easy to do. I went out and I flew like Superman around the house before we recorded today. That's an assertion. And if you start asking me about it and I just keep layering on more assertions,
right,
I have not gotten any closer to providing evidence for or convincing you of the first one, more or less the second or the third or the fourth. You have to actually start somewhere, and he never actually started. He just kept talking at us.
Yeah.
So he's talking at us, and I'm just thinking, okay, at some point we got to dive in, but it just gets better. It gets so much better. I'm like, okay, we really got to dive in, and then he jumps into this.
I told my friend about this that lives right next door to me.
Oh gosh, yes, this guy.
And he told me that his first wife practiced witchcraft. And she did not do the bad witchcraft. She did the good witchcraft. The good witchcraft, yeah. That would bring on good finances and stuff like that. But I believe she brought something through the gate or whatever it is, and two this,
Through the
two
gate.
here, and somehow it got in my house.
What did I mean?
Well, kudos to this guy for knowing the difference between the good witchcraft and the bad witchcraft. But like, oh my goodness, oh my gosh,
Are we really giving him kudos for the good witchcraft and the bad? I at this point, I think I think you got it actually, and that is that when you start getting into fiction that deep, you start treating it as fiction.
Mm-hmm. And there's again, like there are so many layers and levels to this that where do you dive in? Where do you say, okay, stop, we need to go back, and just start peeling back those layers. And
so at this point, we start doing what I think some people would consider snarky or mean. I don't. And the reason I don't is because when I encountered these people in the wild, it was, I want to tell you this wild story. And the reaction that I'm expecting from you is, oh, that's amazing. It's a good thing you're safe. Just totally, no. These are bad ideas, and they don't deserve, those ideas don't deserve respect. They just don't.
Exactly.
If you want to start providing evidence, if you want to start, engaging with them instead of just talking at people about whatever half-baked assertions you want, then we'll treat it more seriously. But until then, it starts to get ridiculous. So you start to get, let's see here.
You are jumping to a conclusion that you feel is most likely. And the conclusion that you feel is most likely is that a demon that's invisible popped into existence next door. And what it did is it went into your house and decided it wanted to scare you out of your house by picking up Coke bottles and floating them in front of you and then putting them back down. Is that correct? That is the most likely explanation.
That's the only thing I know how to relate to it, because I know it wasn't human.
We tried.
And that is it. That right there, that's the crux. That's the only thing I can relate it to. That's the only explanation I can think of. That's the one that collects all of the disparate things that I believe about the world and puts them into this narrative that makes me think that I understand.
Yeah.
And that's useful. That's what the brain was supposed to do. Like that is how the brain works. It takes all the information you've aggregated over your lifespan. And when you come across an event or a thing that you don't understand, your brain quickly grabs all the things it can and creates a narrative for you so that you can better understand the thing you're experiencing. And that doesn't mean that that's always accurate. It's very much dependent on what you've been inputting and the kind of information that you've been aggregating, because you're only able to use the tools that you have and the information that you've gathered. And if you're gathering that information, then you will get false results out of it.
Absolutely. And we challenged him. How did you know that you weren't dreaming? How did you, and it kept coming. There was more and more and more. And it's like, okay, we need to start cutting down the level of, how do I say it? The level of care, not the level of care, the level of respect. There we go. That you treat that story with. And so he starts.
When I seen that floating in front of my face, the only thing I could think about was my days in church and what the Bible said, and that's the only thing I could think about, man. That's the only thing that come to my mind. I guess that's how I was programmed or something.
I absolutely agree. There's programming there.
Yeah.
that I hope
a moment of enlightenment right there. That was exactly right.
Yeah. And so I remember I tried to go in and give kind of these possible other explanations, and he just was not getting it. And you hopped in and you gave your own experience of, hey, there was something that I didn't understand. It happened while you were working at a hotel.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And at that point, the crew started getting into this because they were just like, look.
Too many cups flying around.
Yeah, it's getting a little too nuts. And so you are making this attempt to engage while at the same time we're cutting the legs out from under the seriousness of it.
I was the only person in there. I have no idea what happened. As far as I know, I was awake. But I'm not going to go and say, oh, I know that was the ghost of the Confederate soldier who accidentally shot somebody. In the
and my focus has been
because
shot.
that was the story.
Yeah,
But
no.
this happened 7 times, and it went back and forth, back and forth. I'm talking about 7, 8, 9 foot wide, went back and forth, floating in the air. We're not talking about one
This
quick
is
incident.
There's
I'm talking about
definitely
this
no
happened
possible explanation.
Long enough for me to take a film of it if I had a camera.
I could have filmed it if I had a camera. Everybody has a camera these days.
Yeah, if you have a phone in your pocket, you have
What
a
are you
camera.
calling on? Unless it's an actual potato, you have a phone on that camera.
Yeah. I mean, kudos to the crew for impromptu grabbing a soda can, tying it onto a stick, and then running it out there. But you know what? It's not just us. There is a crew that's backing us up on those shows, and they are making that statement too. Hey, these wild ideas do not deserve the respect that people are giving them. And it's just rough. And so, what I wanted to take us to here was we went to talking about, did you dream about it? What are the possible explanations? Mm-hmm. And he had given us...
I'm asking you how you've determined that it's not a dream or it's not a hallucination.
I know it wasn't a dream for a fact.
For a fact.
It was in the middle of the day, and I don't see things. I don't do drugs and stuff.
It's a fact. It happened in the middle of the day. I don't do drugs. And then toward the end of the call, we ask him more about it.
And it was 1 o'clock in the morning. Everybody's asleep.
I can get my neighbors in 5 minutes. I can get a camera in 5 minutes.
Wait, you said it was the middle of the day.
It was in the middle of it was 1 a.m. at night.
No, you said earlier it was in the middle of the day.
You said you couldn't have been asleep because it was.
I didn't mean daylight as in day outside. 1
Oh.
a.m. is the next day because it's
God.
after 12.
Oh no.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, okay. There's a level of actual dishonesty here. Which is not just and that's something that with these kinds of calls, you really have to be focused on the details like this. There's some where, somebody's calling in about something and you can focus more on, the methodology or the philosophy behind it or connecting with them on a human level. But when somebody calls in with a story like this, with this level of just ridiculousness to it, you have to pay attention to those small details and get them to go back to it and get them to reference things they said before, because this has happened multiple times in my experience on the show, where somebody will call in with a very out there story and give it once, and then we kind of poke at it, and then we ask them to go back, and a detail is different. An important detail is different. So that is kind of the tack that I take when I hear a call like this, just because if it's dishonest, I want to know, not to pass judgment, but to know that we need to move on. And this isn't somebody who's actually going to be helped by talking with us.
Yeah. No, I think you summed that up perfectly. I mean, there's use there. The use of it, I guess, because I'm looking at this after the fact and I'm thinking, what can we salvage? We can salvage that people are getting an experience. They're getting to see something and engage with something that if they don't live in that part of the country, people are going to say that person is a Poe. Whether or not he was, he exemplified what a lot of people resonated with, because there were a lot of people who reached out and said, hey, that guy, that's my uncle. Hey, that guy, that's my neighbor, and not him specifically, but that kind of thing. And so, and so we kind of have that responsibility that it's multiple things. It's providing a show. It's trying to keep the pacing. It's continuing the conversation in a meaningful way. It's keeping an eye on what we can help show the audience. And if we're not teaching when it comes to, epistemic, justifications and how to come to good reasons or good, true beliefs, looking at good evidence and having good reasons for asserting the things that you do, this is a window. And we get to look and we get to say, hey, you know what? I get that, you might be a very liberal Christian who is totally cool with gay marriage. And, what's the harm in believing in spirits and things like that? The harm is that.
The harm is people actually believe that. And I think the last thing that I would take away from this is just the way that we engage with that hopefully exemplify the way you engage with people when they come and try and tell you stories like that. You don't just, you might be tempted to just laugh and walk away or dismiss it out of hand. But if you don't get down to the root of things and figure out, oh, this person might not actually be honest, then so many people who claim to have been atheists before and were changed by someone's testimony or an experience that they had, or like all of these things can, if you just take them at face value, this thing happened, this is magical, I can't explain this or understand it, and I trust this other person, so I'm going to have to change my worldview. That's a big thing to do. So when someone comes to you with a claim this out there, you have to dig. You have to make sure that they are honest. You have to make sure that things are lining up. And even if you walk away still unsure, still not knowing exactly where that story came from, because for me, I for the life of me, I don't know why he chose to call in with that, or if there's a grain of truth there that he was just building off of, or what. You will at least know that you've gotten enough to say, okay, there's a question mark here. This is not enough evidence. This is not concrete enough for me to be forced to change a worldview.
Agreed. So I think he probably called because how often does somebody share a story like that and other people not just totally validate and go, oh no, what an amazing experience. I don't think he was expecting someone to call BS.
That could be. Yeah. Think about his neighbor. He went to his neighbor and told him that, and his neighbor was like, well, my first wife did practice witchcraft. So,
right? Yes. We live in that world.
Yeah, exactly.
We absolutely do.
Yeah.
And yeah, the dishonesty. I'm just touching back on a couple of the things that you said. The dishonesty, especially of, oh, I was once an atheist like you. If you were and you were convinced, awesome. But if you think you're doing yourself a favor by saying that, you've looked at things rationally, but then obviously show that you haven't, you are cutting yourself out because you're showing that you're willing to lie like that to try and convince somebody. And that's just, that's dishonesty. We don't have time for it. But V, it is way past time. Murphy's Law should have been ended 5 minutes ago, max. How can people find you?
Yeah, people can find me at my website, vroselabianca.com. I also am on Twitter at authorconfusion, and on Patreon, that's patreon.com/vlabianca. I have just started doing this thing where every Thursday at 5:30 Central before Secular Sexuality, I hop on a Facebook live stream and have an hour of conversation with people. I did my first one yesterday. It went so well, and I met so many awesome people. And we raised $600 for the ACLU. So that's very, very exciting. That donation will continue to be happening throughout the next couple of weeks as well. So if you wanted to join that, give a little bit of money to the ACLU, or donate to me to help me keep creating content, that would be amazing.
That's wonderful. Yes. So I'm going to have the link to your Facebook. I'm going to have the link to your Patreon, your YouTube page. What's this about androgynous cat cyborg?
Oh, yes, there is some merch in the wings. I'm currently running a poll on my Patreon page to I will be on Wednesday. All of my patrons get first look at the artwork and get to weigh in on which one they like. I've got 2 options at this point. So I'm just waiting on my patrons to give me their thoughts, and then we're gonna start seeing some merch out here.
Okay, so have you always been an androgynous cat cyborg, or how did that come about? I have to ask.
Yeah, I mean, it does spark conversation. The trolls in the comments tend to have fun with my gender, which is good because I also have fun with my gender, and having fun with one's gender is kind of my whole deal. So they think they're being sly or hurtful, but actually they're just validating my entire approach to the concept. One person made fun of me being an androgynous cat cyborg, or whatever V claims to get victim points these days. And
wow.
hey, how could you not just take that and run? So I took that, I ran with it. Enough people were like, where are the t-shirts, that I thought I should probably do something with it. So androgynous cat cyborg is something you should keep an eye out for if you have any interest in playing around with gender a little bit and being a little bit fun.
I can't wait to see it. I'm excited. V, thank you so much, and I will see you on Talk Heathen.
Sounds good. See you Sunday.
Take care. Alrighty, everybody. That was my conversation with V. I hope you enjoyed. I know I don't have a whole lot of time because this episode went way longer than it was supposed to, but I want to thank my patrons. Thank you so much. If you want to check out other conversations that I've had with Murphy's Law, click here. If you want to subscribe, please do hit subscribe so you can get notifications for upcoming stuff. Click here, and then right here, I will put the playlist for Conversations with Christian Apologists if you want to check those out. Take care, everybody. Stay safe.